Welcome to William Steele True Crime. William Steele with Steele the Spotlight radio and TV show. Thank you for joining us. You know, we keep a clean show, we keep an inspirational show. That being said, I have a dear friend back, a guy that stood by me through, I don't know, what is it, 18, 20 years of incarceration almost. Uh, Took my phone calls, drove him crazy. Gary Greenberg. Gary, professionally, is the former senior editor of the National Enquirer. National Enquirer, the biggest, most famous tabloid in the planet. Every time you go to the checkout stands, you'll see the National Enquirer, the Globe, and many other publications. So my understanding is he still writes or occasionally writes for AARP, Life Extension Magazine, Boca Raton Magazine, various other publications. He also writes a lot of true crime stories and fiction and nonfiction books. He's got the Beer Diet book. He was my co-author on Sex and the Serial Killer, My Bizarre Times with Robert Durst. And he's put out another book called Dead Man's Tale. That being said, let me introduce Gary, and he could sing his praises and introduce himself. And we're going to get deep into some of these true crime stories that have been in the tabloids and what it is to be a writer of these type of things, what it takes to write these stories. So with that being said, Gary, thank you so much for coming back on the show. Really happy to have you here.
Well, it's always good to see you, Bill, and to chat with you. Certainly, we have a history that began in the crime-related part. Ironically, it wasn't my job as a tabloid writer doing a lot of crime stories that led me to meet Bill. Actually, I was a foreman for a jury on a murder case, and Bill was a witness for the defense, and that's how we met. But anyway, as a writer for the National Enquirer, we cover a lot of different subjects, but true crime is one of them. And it was probably my favorite, part of the job, because true crime stories are just, the stuff that's in the tabloids is very interesting. It's either somebody who is famous who committed a crime, or it's just a crime that's so heinous that gets a lot of attention. And while I was there, we wrote about some of the crimes of the century, including O.J. Simpson and JonBenét Ramsey, Casey Anthony, the little girl, a teenager in Utah, Elizabeth Smart, who was kidnapped from her home. A lot of these things that were mysteries when they started, and eventually many of them were solved and many of them weren't. So there's still some unsolved mysteries out there, but it's always been entertaining and fun to write about this stuff.
Right. A lot of people, they see the tabloids sometimes as, exploiting these things. But I know for you as a human being, it's got to be heartbreaking to really have to delve into these stories and maybe getting tips about things that maybe the police aren't getting tips about. How does that work?
Well, you really have to compartmentalize it. You can't get too emotionally involved in it, because you want to tell the news. And you have to kind of separate yourself from your emotions a little bit. I mean, these things like JonBenét Ramsey, you're dealing with a 6-year-old child who was found dead in her home the day after Christmas. I mean, what heartbreak is that? And on top of that, the circumstances were such that it involved the family, and they went through a lot of issues, it was harmful to a lot of people, but you have to just separate yourself emotionally from that to be able to write about it.
Right. Now, JonBenét Ramsey, she was the one whose parents had her, I guess, in these beauty pageants. A lot of people say that she was, coming across as, like a little miniature adult woman, attracting certain types of people. You've written several stories about that case. Sadly, it's still not been solved. And I know family members have been falsely accused and under suspicion. So our prayers go out for that family. The remaining ones, I think her mother passed away, right?
Yeah, Patsy, I think she had some kind of cancer, maybe breast cancer. Right. But her dad's around, and we had a lot of issues with them because there was a lot of speculation the family was involved, because the circumstances were very bizarre. They didn't know where the child had been. They thought that she was kidnapped. They found a ransom note, and the ransom note was, they thought that maybe Patsy had written it, that somehow the child had been killed while being disciplined by accident, and then they were trying to cover it up. Yeah. But they never found any DNA evidence or anything that really support all those theories. However, while the speculation was out there, The family had a very good attorney named Lynn Wood, and he kept things pretty difficult for a lot of publications, including the tabloids.
I've got a question for you. It seems like I recall in that supposed ransom letter that there was a dollar amount requested that was identical or close to what the father was expecting or just received in a bonus. Was there
It
some?
was something like that. It was like $184,000 or something like that. I don't remember the exact figure
Right.
now.
So therefore, the argument would go: who would know that amount, right? So who was suspected of doing this? Are you allowed to say?
Well, I mean, there were a lot of suspects, and they never really came to a solid conclusion. It's still an unsolved mystery. The latest theory is that there was this pedophile who lived in the area. His name was, I think, uh, I forget his name. It was Oliver was his last name, I believe.
Right.
And he's in jail for some other, perverted crime. So it's possible that he did it. It's possible nobody will ever know who did it.
But
But it was unfair. I mean, there was speculation that because she was paraded out as a beauty queen, and these kids are taught to act kind of sexy as kids, because they want to be beautiful, they want to attract attention,
right.
and it's an element of the population that's perversely attractive, and that might have contributed to the crime, but who knows?
Right. Now, on all these other cases, can you remember a time when maybe you got a tip that the police didn't have and you either had to turn it over to them or you ran a story on it? Maybe you took it as being really true, or is that not something you do? You don't vet the tips. I think you have other editors that would do that as well, or
Yeah, I mean, nothing comes to mind specifically. We had other cases that we broke. We broke John Edwards' love child case. Our reporters found out about that. We broke the case a long time ago with Gary Hart in the monkey business. So in the political arena,
I remember your headline like it was yesterday, and it was in the '80s when that happened.
Which one was that for?
Monkey business with her sitting on his lap.
Yeah, that was on the cover. But that was actually before I started working for them. But I dealt with a lot of the editors who broke that story, and then the reporters are still there at the time.
What about Casey Anthony? That's a horrible case, and we're not making any accusations against her because she's been acquitted. But it seems like there was so much overwhelming evidence that she did it. It's just incredible.
Well, when she had a 2-year-old child who basically disappeared for a month, and she just continued to go out partying and acting as though nothing had ever happened. It was her mother, I believe her name was Cindy, who actually called the cops and said, "Look, my grandchild's been missing for weeks, and my daughter can't tell me where she is."
Right.
And Casey just rattled off lie after lie to investigators. I mean, proven lies that the nanny had kidnapped her. That
Zanny, the nanny.
Yeah, she worked at Universal Studios when she hadn't worked there in years. I mean, there were just a string of lies that she told, and when the child was finally found, I mean, she abandoned her car, which was, I think, given to her by her parents, and the car was towed somewhere. And eventually, when it was recovered, they smelled, basically a dead body smell in the trunk.
Decomposition. Decomposition. I remember that.
Right. So there were all these, the evidence seemed pretty strong. It was a surprise to all of us that she was acquitted.
Her remains, her skull was found very close to the house at the base of a pole that a lineman or somebody found, somebody from utilities.
It was a male person. I think it was a male lady.
And they said there was tape over the mouth with little stickers, and those stickers matched stickers in her bedroom, like hearts or something on the stickers.
Yeah. Well, the theory was that she was like chloroformed to keep quiet, and tape was put over her mouth, and she just suffocated. Wow. I believe that's the theory of how she died. I don't know if they ever really, pinpointed exactly. I know that the cause of death, I think, was suffocation.
I think one of the defenses she eventually raised was like accusing her father of the baby drowned and all this other nonsense. And I don't.
Well, I guess the jury bought it. She said that the baby drowned accidentally, and then her father, I think his name was George, then covered it up. But it didn't seem to make much sense. And look, she got off, and OJ got off. So a lot of people.
I'll never forget the images of Casey Anthony walking out of that Orange County jail. after the acquittal. I can't believe it. Like it's burned in my memory of her walking free after that case.
Yeah. Well, she was perfect tabloid material because she was pretty, so she was attractive. She was bad. She was a bad girl. She liked to party. She liked to hang out with guys. She liked to go to bars, and she didn't really seem to take good care of her child. And people like that are they make perfect tabloid stories.
Yeah. I heard she's either a PI now or a photographer or something in Florida.
Yeah, she lives not too far from where I do. I'm in Boca Raton. I think she's in Lake Worth or West Palm, somewhere up in this area. Right. I haven't really kept up with her, what she's done. She was in the news, a few weeks ago, months ago for something, but nothing really important.
Her and OJ. Now, OJ's, all the evidence is that there's so many people on death row and life sentences for far less evidence that was ever used than to convict him. I mean, my opinion now, he's guilty, right? So okay, he was not found guilty. To this day, the man is free. Incredibly, the man is free. I think that him and Casey Anthony need to get together and start a reality show together. They'd probably make some money doing that. But these people,
yeah. Well, OJ did serve several years for another crime, but OJ, of course, was once again, it's a great tabloid story because it's a famous person. It's a spectacular crime, a bloody crime. There was that inane, slow motion car chase through LA, which captivated everybody's attention. That should have tipped people off that, hey, he might have been guilty.
Right. The white Bronco. Right.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But it just goes to show you his dream team of lawyers was F. Lee Bailey, who was, legendary defense attorney, Robert Shapiro, who was, the Kardashian dad, Johnny Cochran. And so he had and Alan Dershowitz. These are people who are celebrity attorneys, and I guess they get that way because they're pretty good at what they do. But
I think the only survivor of that group is Alan Dershowitz. I believe the other three are deceased already.
Yeah. Well, there were more of them besides that. Johnny Cochran died too. Yeah.
I remember there was a thing when they allowed the jury to tour his house for some reason. And before they did it, the lawyers now admit they staged the house. He didn't basically associate with anybody of his own race, very few people of his own race. And so what they did is the attorneys came and all the pictures he had all over the house with white celebrities and prominent people, took them all down and replaced them with pictures with him with black celebrities and black family members, and they ended up with a very emotional jury that made an emotional decision, not a rational one based upon facts. I mean, I've seen one of the attorneys, I forgot his name. He's kind of got bug eyes. He was saying exactly what they did to stage the house. I don't know.
Well, so, you know what? It's all showbiz. I mean, it really is. It's all showbiz, and that's part of the whole thing. As far as the tabloids go, that was obviously a great story for us, but we had some impact on that case in particular. I don't know if you recall, but there were some footprints of Bruno Magli's shoes, which are designer shoes, Italian shoes that weren't very common.
Yep.
And OJ said that he would never own a quote unquote ugly ass pair of shoes like that.
Yep.
and we had an editor, is the late great Larry Haley, a good friend of mine. I sat right near him, and he was very big on the OJ case, and he spotted a photo of OJ at a football game on the sideline wearing those shoes.
I remember it.
So, that's a case where the tabloids really did contribute to providing evidence for the cops.
Right. You actually broke, the tabloid broke that he lied about that. He lied about the glove, the blood, the DNA, this, that. Like I said, I was a law clerk in prison. There was many, many people in prison forever for way less evidence than they had against O.J. Simpson.
And the funniest thing is this guy, Larry Haley, one of his sources, after O.J. was acquitted, was O.J.'s girlfriend. And her name escapes me at the moment. But one day she calls up and she goes, "Hey, Larry, O.J.'s writing a book about the murder. And he's got the copy right here. You guys can get it. He's out playing golf now. So if you come, you can copy it." and see what he says. You know, it's just a book that he wrote. It's called "If I Did It" or something like that. So Haley sent his top reporter, this British guy, another late great David Wright, out to go get the manuscript. And he takes the manuscript to Kinko's. He copies it. He puts it, back into the desk and comes and gives Haley the manuscript. And it's actually got writing in the margins, OJ's corrections and edits and changes that he wanted to the manuscript. And I said to Larry, I said, "Wow, that's really cool. Where is it?" He goes, "Oh, it's under my desk." And so he pulls it out, and here's this manuscript, and he starts looking at it, and he goes, "Holy hell!" I go, "What?" He goes, "All the markings that OJ made were in blue ink." And David Wright, if he went to Kinko's to copy it, isn't going to copy a 200 or 300 page manuscript color, right? Because he just wants the black. So what Wright must have done is he mixed them up, and he must have returned the Kinko's copy to OJ.
Oh my God!
Larry Haley had the original. His widow probably still has it. I mean, somewhere. I don't know how much this thing's worth, but it was really funny when the look on his face when he opened it up and he started going through it and goes, "Wow, these are OJ's original in the margins here."
He accidentally retained the original.
Yeah, somehow I don't know. Haley was a collector. He's a very interesting guy, but
if you won't mind me asking, how much was she paid to provide that copy?
That I couldn't tell you. It probably wasn't a lot. It wasn't like tens of thousands. It might have been a couple thousand. I'm guessing.
Wasn't it Reagan Books the only one that had the nerve to publish that, and they found out that really, it was his story confessing to murder, and he's denied all royalties to that book right now.
Well, I think that it never got published in that time frame. It got pulled, and Reagan Books was a publishing house founded by I believe it was a former tabloid reporter,
Judith Reagan.
Yeah, I didn't know her that much. That was kind of before my time.
Right.
But of course, we did tons of stories about OJ, following that and all these different theories and, where the knife was and who else might have done it and all kinds of other, stories that we could spin off of that, plus his new crimes. So that was mainly what we focused on. But seeing that original manuscript that he wrote that was a kick.
Hey, Gary, what can you tell us about this particular character here?
Well, that character is Robert Durst.
Right.
And I didn't know that much about him until a buddy of mine said that he wanted to write a book about it, which was you. And we worked on it together. And Durst proved to be as colorful and as bizarre and as tabloid worthy as almost anybody we've written about. Here's a guy that was super rich, that was super perverted, I might say, and just a ruthless killer from what we can tell.
Right. So the Robert Durst, for the audience who doesn't know, that Gary's my co-author on this particular book. It's called Sex and a Serial Killer, My Bizarre Times with Robert Durst. And it's really written from the point of view of trying to raise awareness for the victims about what he was really like behind the scenes in the time that I knew him in New York over the course of many years. I was writing in prison. I was writing an autobiography. He was going to be a small part of it. But then The Jinx on HBO came out about him. And you and I decided to go with a full-blown book focused on him alone. And the book's done well. And Nancy Grace, the queen of true crime, covered it while I was still in prison. And because I couldn't be interviewed while I was in prison, who did the interview? Do you remember?
Yeah. There's some old tabloid writer.
So
it was pretty interesting. She was very perceptive and piercing in some of her questions about it. Of course, I had to, I'm kind of the third person in. It's not a first person story for me. I didn't experience it. So everything had to come through Bill's eyes and prism. And it was interesting to learn about the way that the criminal mind works. Sometimes the psychology of it to me is as fascinating as anything. And there's just a lot of incredible nutcases out there. One of my favorite stories of all time was I wrote it for the Globe. I believe it was about this cannibal named Mewies. He was a German cannibal.
Oh wow.
And he was a weird guy. He was kind of like the guy from Psycho. He lived with his mother. His mother dominated him in this old house somewhere in Germany, and she died. And I guess he just went nuts after she died. I don't recall whether he actually mummified her or just kept her clothing, but there was some element of that to him. But he was a cannibal, and what he would do is he trolled the internet looking for people to eat. And believe it or not, there are people out there who would like to be eaten. And he found a guy, and he invited him for dinner, literally.
Wow.
So they had some wine, and they had some, I guess, some little bit of food or something. And then they started cutting this guy's pieces of this guy off and eating him. He was actually the victim actually was eating part of himself. I don't want to mention which part, but it resembles a hot dog. And he complained about the food not because it was one of his, should be one of his most precious body parts, but that Mewies hadn't cooked it right. So it was tough.
Oh my God.
But
Wow.
it wasn't long after that Mewies apparently put this guy in the tub, cut him, and he bled out. And then he butchered him, and he put the meat in the freezer, which cops eventually found. And this was many years ago. Mewies is probably out. I mean, he got convicted of a crime, but he was also deemed to be mentally ill and ill.
What years was he actively doing this? Do you remember the years?
No,
Do you remember the years?
Yeah, this was back probably early 2000s.
Oh, yeah. I remember the case like that with Jeffrey Dahmer. He was a homosexual guy that would bring guys home and then drill holes in their head and drip acid in their brains. And
yeah, he was a real monster. I mean, there's some monsters out there, and then there's some horrific monsters, and he was one of the worst because he would torture his victims.
He had barrels.
A lot of these people just kill them, but when you go out there and you actually torture people, that adds it to another level.
He's horrendous. Jeffrey Dahmer was that horrendous. Our prayers, my prayers, and our heart goes out to the victims. I'm all about turning my life around and crime prevention, and we're doing this show to raise awareness about what goes on in this world. And I've had a front row seat to a lot of it because of the lifestyle that I chose, but not around these type of killers necessarily, but as a law clerk in prison, you hear a lot of these stories and you get to know a lot of these horrendous guys and cases. And then from Gary's point of view, writing about them for so many years, is there any other case you'd like to bring up to discuss that really horrendous true crime?
Well, another case we covered a lot was Elizabeth Smart, and she was I believe, 14-year-old living in Salt Lake City, and was abducted from her house in the middle of the night. I don't even think it was the middle of the night. It was probably like 11 or 12 o'clock.
Right.
But she was just not there in the morning. And, these things that are mysteries. I mean, these are real mysteries. How can somebody just steal a child in the middle of the night? Nobody really knew. You always want to question the parents, because how can you be in a house and have your kid abducted? It's beyond the realm of most people's thought. But she actually, survived, which is good. She was abducted by a guy who kept her, and he was a handyman for the family, and he abducted her. He's a religious, not in some way, shape, or form, a cult type person.
Right.
And she actually she had like Stockholm syndrome to a degree. She went out with him. She walked around. She was on the streets in public and didn't scream, "Help, I've been kidnapped." So it's an odd thing, but she came out of it, and now she's a real advocate for victims.
Yeah, shout out to her. She's really come a long way. I remember she was held prisoner by I forget the guy's name. What was his name again that did it? And then Wanda Barzee was the girlfriend.
Barzee was the girlfriend.
Right.
She went to jail. I forget the handyman's name.
Yep. And then they had her at like some encampment in the woods, not even far from her house, and they overlooked it several times when they were searching for her.
Yeah, and it was just but that was another one where the media helped break the case. I think that that was on America's Most Wanted. and somebody saw America's Most Wanted and saw that and recognized her when she was out and about and called the cops, and that's how she got rescued.
Right. He used to walk her around in like a white garb, almost like a hijab, with her face covered.
Right? Yeah,
Somebody still recognized her with them or with him at a supermarket or something.
yeah.
I remember that. All right, Gary. So you're going on your writing career now. You've written these true crime books. You've written crime books. You've written tons of crime articles for the Globe. And give a list of all the publications, just so I don't stumble over it again. What have you written for besides the Enquirer? You've had a
the Enquirer. The Enquirer is owned. The mother company for the Enquirer also owns Globe, Star Magazine, the Weekly World News, Examiner. They own a lot of the tabloids you see. The supermarket tabloids are owned by the same company. So therefore, I've written and continue to write for most of them. Star became a magazine that originally was a tabloid when I started, but I still do some work for Globe, Examiner. I just wrote a story about the Titan, the Titan implosion, the group that went down to look for the Titanic, at the Titanic. But generally, I do mostly right now. I write for the Enquirer.
Did you come across images of the remains of the individuals that were in that submersible?
No, I don't think there's images of remains. I don't know how much the remains would be there. They were under, I don't know how much, 2,000 pounds per square inch pressure at 12,000 feet below the surface of the sea. They would get crushed pretty thoroughly by that.
Some people speculate they turned into basically a puff of blood instantaneously, like a 30th of a millisecond, and then whatever life is down there probably ate the rest. So.
Yeah, well, they also believed that they knew something was wrong before the thing imploded. So there was a time frame between when there was likely a time frame between when they knew they were in trouble and when they actually, the thing imploded. Once it imploded, they were done, instantly.
Is there any truth that they detected banging at some point? Banging will help us, down.
No, I don't think that. I don't recall that. I think they had some indication of the actual implosion, that there was a sound there. I'm not sure they did anything else. Like I said, that's not really something that we've looked at in depth, no pun intended, but I just happened to do a story about what James Cameron, the director for Titanic, said. It was one of those things that should have been prevented. The craft was really the type of hull that it had, a carbon fiber hull, is not really designed for multiple dives. And over the course of its history, it weakened, and it was kind of an accident waiting to happen. The company had been warned by a lot of people.
Right. I heard that.
And didn't really do it. And Cameron made a very interesting statement about how he said it really kind of is ironic because it mirrored what happened with the Titanic. The Titanic captain was warned about the icebergs and just barreled ahead in the middle of the night on a moonless night into iceberg, seas. So he said it was kind of, in a way, almost fitting, but tragically fitting.
Right. I remember they said there was a lot of whistleblower complaints, even within the company. Ironically, the CEO himself was on it when they got crushed.
Yeah, so he believed in it, but when you go 12,000 feet below the sea, or if you go into orbit in space, and whenever you're an adventurer and you do these things, there's an element of risk, and you have to accept that risk, and your family has to accept that risk, and even the problem with those things is that there's not much of a second chance. With most things, you have a second chance. There's backup safety measures and all kinds of things. But when you're in outer space or 12,000 feet below the surface of the sea, there's no second chance. If something goes wrong, that's
no chance of rescue in those situations.
Yeah, you have to understand that and take that risk when you do it. And unfortunately, things that could be prevented. Look at the Challenger explosion. Well, they didn't know that the cold would freeze the O-rings and that would make it blow up. But things happen, and they should have realized that. So you can't when you're dealing with things like that, you can't check everything. There's just stuff. That's why it's exploring, because you're doing stuff. You're pushing the envelope. When you push the envelope, things happen. They don't happen all the time, but they're more likely to happen than walking down the street. They're
It's
riding
like,
your bike.
300 years ago when they were still exploring the globe, transversing entire oceans in wooden ships with only wind power and no radios or no chance for help if something went wrong.
It's amazing anybody survived.
Now you've become you're definitely a prolific writer, and like I said, you are a dear friend. And abundance of full disclosure, Gary is a very good friend. I often visit him. Well, we plan to visit again, and so we're going to be filming in Florida shortly in a few weeks, and we'll be down there. But so you had a book come out, which you now put out again. Tell us about this one.
Dead Man's Tale is a novel. It's a gritty crime novel that's set in Miami, Florida, and I use a lot of my crime writing knowledge and experience is infused in the book. The interesting thing about it, like I was saying before, it's a lot of times it's the psychology of the criminal mind that's interesting. And when you write a book, you become like the person who creates the psychology in each individual. And this book's, I can't tell you too much. The plot is very convoluted and interesting. It involves science fiction stuff. It's got an element of gothic romance to it. It's got, just regular crime. So it's a lot put together. But one of the characters in it is this pint-sized serial killer. His name's Peter Lizardo, and he just likes killing things, whether it's bugs or animals or humans. It almost doesn't matter. He feels a surge of energy when he snuffs the life out of anything.
Right.
And when I wrote this book, and when you're a writer, I mean, all your characters are a little bit of you. So the hero, who's a reporter named Dan Talley, he's an investigative reporter. There's a woman who's a young channel to the afterlife. Her name is Valia Thomas. There's a quote unquote kind of mad scientist, Dr. Sterling. And there's a whole bunch of criminals and criminal types and interesting characters, homeless people. I like writing about all different types of characters. But in every character you write about as an author, there's a little bit of you in all of them. And the scariest thing in writing this novel was that the easiest character for me to write was this little serial killer, Peter Lizardo. I could get easily right into his head to the point that it almost scared me that I could understand how killing something could give him such pleasure, almost like sex or doing drugs or booze or whatever. More so, actually, because the thrill that he got was beyond anything that we would normally feel a normal person.
Let's for the audience, we don't condone this type of behavior, and Gary has written so many of these stories, it probably just flows out of him. But there are people that have these ideas, but they don't act on them, and you're able to.
Yeah, well, I think like what my point was is that we all have a little bit of all of this in us. We're human, and these are human beings. And I mean, all of us have said, "Oh man, I feel like killing that person." We don't take it seriously, but we have, in our instinctive, somewhere in our beings, there's a killer, and there's a liar, and there's a thief, and there's all these things are within all of us to some degree.
Do you have a ghost there?
Huh?
Do you have a ghost in your house?
That was Roxanne.
Your door just opened. I figured it was Roxanne.
Yeah, it's our dog Roxanne. She's scared of thunder, and we're starting to get some thunder. So she comes in here and usually crawls under my desk, which is where she's going now.
Okay. Gary, you're all over the map with your writing, but I know you like the crime stuff, but you're also, I think you discussed you're writing some children's books you may be putting out, but also this one here is one of that Dead Man's Tale, and this book here, we're going to put the links in the descriptions. Please support Gary. Purchase these books. They're incredible books. Now, I have not read the entire Dead Man's Tale. Somebody in my household has, and she raves about it. She said, this book is really, really well written, and she's a voracious reader. So I want you to know that. So I'm going to make sure that she puts a review up for you. But please check out his books. Links are in the description. Now tell us about this one here. What's going on here?
Well, my side job is I'm a health journalist, and half of my work is done doing stories about mostly holistic health, because I believe that you need to take responsibility for your health if you want to stay healthy. And being a beer drinker and having people always come up to me and saying, "How can you brew and drink so much beer and not gain weight?" And I decided to write a book to explain how I do it. And I use a lot of the health tips that I learned from writing over 300 published stories about holistic health. And I decided to share that with the world so that more people can drink more beer and not gain weight.
Right.
That's the shot of me playing rugby. I still play rugby. I'm 69 years old, and I can still fly through the air and run around with kids. So a lot of that's due to lifestyle things, eating good food and getting exercise and getting good sleep and having a wonderful relationship with my wife that I'm still in love with her after all these years, my wife, Nora. And all these things combine to keep people healthy. So it's not just one thing. It's, if you have an ailment, it's likely it's not just your liver, your heart, or something. It's your whole being that makes you sick or healthy. So even spiritually, people who are spiritual, who believe there's something beyond the material world, they're healthier people. People who believe in prayer are healthier people. People who are optimistic, and believe in positive things are healthier people.
Right.
So there's a lot that goes into health, and diet and exercise are probably the first two on the list, but there's a lot of other things. And I discuss all this stuff in my book, plus some little tips on certain supplements and different books you could read to keep yourself healthy, because you can't drink beer and not lose weight or not gain weight if you're not healthy in general.
Right. Now I understand you've written for, I think it's Life Extension and other health magazines. I think AARP, but also you attend annually the what's it, the hack life biohacker
It's
conference.
called biohacking. I was just there. It was in Orlando this year. They move it around. But biohacking is using technology, and well, it's not just technology. It's even some ancient techniques such as meditation and yoga and whatever it might be to hack your own biology, because we're all extremely unique biological specimens, and no two people are alike. So there's no one size fits all. For example, everybody talks about spinach is such a superfood, right? Everybody should eat all the spinach they can because it's green, it's loaded with vitamins and minerals, and it's got very few calories, it's got fiber, it's got all these wonderful things. Well, spinach also has a compound that's called oxalates, and oxalates can be very, very problematic for a lot of people.
Wow.
So spinach is really not a great choice for everyone. It might be for some people, but certainly people who can't metabolize the oxalates, they end up with these compounds forming crystals in their blood. And crystals are sharp, and they destroy cells. They can accumulate in joints and cause arthritis, and cause all kinds of kidney stones and other problems. So these are things that and you can find out. I mean, that's the key with the biohacking, is you can actually find out what is good for your body and what isn't. And then it's up to you to make those sacrifices and make those decisions, and just eat a little better. For some people, exercise is not that good because aerobic exercise creates oxidative stress on the body. And people who don't deal with toxins well and oxidative stress shouldn't really do aerobic exercise.
Wow.
It even goes down to that. So unless you know what your genetic code is and how it affects you, it's very hard for you to determine what really is the healthiest thing for you to do.
Let's give a shout out to the company or to one of the companies you're aware of that is doing that genetic testing, where people can find out specifically what they need to do, eliminate, or intake.
Yeah, well, the most impressive thing I saw at the conference this year, and it actually was something that we call it a lanyap in New Orleans. When you're in New Orleans, it's like a freebie. It was the day before the conference started, and there was a lecture, and I wasn't even going to go to it, but I didn't have anything else to do, so I went there. And it was this guy Kashish Khan, and he started this company called the DNA Company.
Mm-hmm.
And the DNA company looks at your functional DNA. Functional DNA is the stuff that can affect you, and actually that you can change. The DNA is a code that's written into all of your cells, but the genes, they express themselves. They turn on and off like switches. Some of them, not all of them. But when you understand your genetic code, that's like an instruction manual for your body. And the way that this company interprets it, and then they give you tips on not only what kind of foods you can eat, but the certain, how your moods are. I mean, they affect your neurotransmitters,
Right.
and they affect your hormones, especially for females. Hormonal health is very, very important, and until you can understand how these things are working and what you need to do to make up for some deficits, or in some cases to tone down some things that are working overtime, it just makes it a lot easier rather than just taking a bunch of vitamins or supplements or whatever they might be that might or might not be doing you any good.
Right. So in my case, we're covering true crime. So I can couch it like this. The real crime is not taking care of your health. So you attend the biohacking conference. It's an annual event. The DNA company, as a courtesy to them and to what Gary's discovered, I will put a link in the description to both these organizations because, Gary, I had a health scare recently. I almost lost my life a few weeks ago. I had an almost completely blocked artery that I wasn't aware of. And you've been telling me since before I got out of prison I need to lose weight, start eating healthier, and follow some tips and some advice you had. And I didn't take it that serious. I knew I needed to do it, but you always think you have forever to get around to things. And so, being in prison, I was denied all kinds of foods, and anytime I see something interesting, I eat it, and then eat some more, and eat some more. And I was living essentially off pizza, lasagna, and Doritos since I got out. Those were my staples, and everything else I could lay eyes on. So
they say your health, there's like a bucket, and the bucket gradually will fill up with bad stuff, and you don't really notice it until the bucket suddenly something does, pushes you over the edge, and the bucket overflows, and then all hell breaks loose.
The
really sick.
reality is that, though, what I'm learning the last few weeks is that a lot of these things are reversible, but you don't want to reach a certain tipping point where it just takes your life and that's it. That being said, and I told you this, I'd like you to come on as a guest on Health Matters and the crime of not taking care of your health. We're doing something with Dr. Rudy Katchman. He's a retired neurosurgeon, very prominent philanthropist in this community here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And we're going to be doing a cooking show. His focus is really on keto, so he's got me trying to get me on a keto diet. He realizes there's going to be some cheating and all that, but I do want to take it serious. I'd love to have you on as a guest. What can you tell me about the keto diet and that particular diet and its effectiveness? Do you know anything?
Yeah, well, a keto diet is basically almost no carbs, no sugars, no carbs. You live. Most of your calories come from healthy fats. Healthy fats come from avocados. They come from certain types of fish. Most fish, actually.
Right.
And some vegetables. I mean, there are fats in vegetables too, and some saturated fat from healthy sources like grass-fed beef.
Mm-hmm.
So the keto diet, you eat almost no carbs. It's very difficult. There's no bread, no rice, no beer, and no pizza. And a lot of the foods that we're used to eating are just loaded with carbs. And what that does is your body normally will burn glucose, which is a product, it's a sugar that carbs produce glucose in your blood.
Right.
So your energy from carbohydrates turns into this glucose, and your body uses glucose for energy. But it's a very dirty energy, and your cells don't really burn the glucose fully, and you end up with these compounds that stay in your cells and gunk them up. It's like nobody's taking out the trash. Fats burn much cleaner. So when you eat only fats, your body has no glucose left to burn, so it starts burning fat. and the fat burns much cleaner, and it doesn't leave much in the way of waste products.
So you are an advocate of eliminating sugar and carbohydrates from, for example, my diet. I mean, I don't eat a lot of sweets per se, but I do eat a lot of carbs.
Well, carbs turn into sugar, so it's
Right.
almost ends up being the same thing.
Exactly.
Sugar, and high fructose corn syrup, and other types of sugar, and even artificial sugars, the sweeteners, are all kind of bad. There's none that are great for you. A keto diet. I've never done a keto diet, but I don't think I really need it. Maybe
No.
it would benefit me. Typically, people they cycle in and out of keto. You don't stay on a keto diet forever. Generally, you do it for a few weeks or a couple months, and then you cycle back into something that's got more carbs. But I think Americans in general could limit the carbohydrates. That would help most people. And when you eat healthy fats, that's good for you. But be aware that a lot of the fats that are promoted by even your doctor, these polyunsaturated oils, these seed oils, like corn oil or safflower oil, or anything that comes from a plant other than olive oil. Most of the stuff we get is horribly highly processed. It's made unstable, and cooking with it just makes it more toxic. You're better off sticking with trying not to cook your food under high heat that much, and avoid those oils. Use olive oil. Coconut oil is a good one to use. It's got a fairly high burn point, so you can cook higher, sauteing vegetables. But saturated fat actually has a much higher burn point, so it doesn't get destroyed by high heat like some of these other oils.
Right.
So that's just a couple of tips. But like I said, what's good for one isn't good for everybody. So the best thing to do is to find a company like the DNA company, and get yourself tested and find out what you specifically need, and then you just go out. Once you have a plan, you go out and do it.
Absolutely. Now, you attended this for what, personal benefit, or you're writing articles for publications about it as well, about the conference?
No, I write. I had a press pass, and I interviewed a bunch of the speakers there. I covered it for. I do a lot of health stories for Newsmax, and
Right.
their newsletter called Health Radar,
Okay.
and then Newsmax magazine. Most of my health stories are for them, and last time I went 2 years ago, I probably got about 6 or 8 stories out of it. So hopefully I'll get the same this time. There's going to be a story about biohacking in the Enquirer coming up soon. The father of biohacking, Dave Asprey, is the one who runs the whole shebang there, and he's the star of the show. And he's got a great story too. I don't think we have the time for me to tell his whole story, but he's the guy that came up with this whole concept. He was a computer whiz, and it was getting unhealthy, very unhealthy by the time he was 30, and decided that he was going to hack his own biology. And the whole industry's grown up out of it. And it's only like 10 years ago that he really started.
I'll tell you what, I'd love to have him on. And again, I do inspirational and true crime, but in the context of not taking care of your health, I believe what I did to myself is a crime. In prison, we live off these ramen noodle soups because the food is so horrendous and unhealthy. But then you'd eat whatever you eat, and it's like empty calories, so you eat some more. So I gained over 100 pounds. So I'd love to have him on just to spread the word, raise awareness, and try to, as I'm trying to make myself healthy, try to help other people survive this obesity and diabetes and cancer, heart disease, and all this stuff. So,
well, I can share his PR team with you, and you can shoot a request. He's very much in demand. He's got his own podcast. He's a best-selling author. I mean, he's pretty well known out there.
I'll put the link into the podcast. The name of it is. Do you remember the name?
Of Asprey's diet. I think right now the company's Upload Labs. What he's doing is he's creating a network of franchises all around the country of these super high tech workout labs, so workout gyms really, and they have equipment that instead of being on a bike and spinning for 45 minutes, you can do it for 3 or 4 minutes and you get the same workout because it's got artificial intelligence and it pushes you just at the right moments and all. They got cryo technology where you go into these freezing ice 200 degrees below zero chambers for like
you tried that last year, that cryo, I believe.
Yeah, I did.
I remember.
They got electromagnetic field pads, and they got red light therapies, infrared light saunas, and all these different things in these labs. It's kind of like he says to work smarter, not harder. So his whole idea is because he's a very busy guy, so he wants to save time. So he says he gets his aerobic workout for the whole week in the same amount of time it takes him to brush his teeth every day.
Right.
But I spend 25 minutes on a bike every morning,
Gary, you're definitely a fascinating individual. I'm glad to call you a friend. And, people think, you're just a tabloid writer and all that. But, man, you've got so many other facets to what you're doing. And I appreciate you coming on the show again. If there's anything else you'd like to talk about or promote, by all means, we're going to definitely have links to all your books in the description. Also, your YouTube channel, The Beer
Diet Guy.
The Beer Diet Guy, your YouTube channel is very, very funny. Check the beer diet guy on YouTube if you want to really laugh hard. It's the clips he put out. What else would you like to promote or discuss? Anything?
Not really. The Dead Man's Tale. It's a republished version that I originally wrote back in 2001. It's a really, really, if I do say so myself, it's the kind of book that once you get into it, especially by the time you get to the second half, you will not be able to put it down. It's unlike almost any other crime book because it's got these science fiction elements in it. It's really a whole lot of stuff. It's got philosophy. It's got, I call it like a little bit of a cross between the Celestine Prophecy, which was a spiritual journey, and Elmore Leonard, who wrote, some of the best crime fiction around. So I think it's got a lot of those elements and it's very unique. And give it a try. If you don't like it, I'll send you your money back.
There you go. You can't beat that.
Guaranteed right here.
That's right. And this one here is incredible because I know this is flying off the shelves and getting great reviews. We're not making medical claims, but he has a technique for drinking beer and not gaining weight.
Well, I just share what I did. And like I said, it won't work for everybody necessarily, but at least get some tips. And it's a funny book. It's all done tongue in cheek and it's easy reading. It's a lot of fun. I get great reviews. And the best thing about it is I can go and do book signings at these little microbreweries everywhere. And usually they give me a free bar tab. So now I can sell some books, but Nora and I get to drink some beer for free. So if you see me, you might see me around the country. Nora and I are taking off on our annual trip in our fairly new camper trailer, and we'll be taking off within a month or so and traveling around. And you might see me around. So if you do, stop in and say hi and say you saw us here on Bill's show. And thanks for having me.
Hey Gary, what did I do for a living as a criminal prior to all this mess and me getting in trouble? I'm not glorifying my past. I'm sorry for everything I've done, but what did I do? Do you remember?
Well, from what I know, you were a thief. You were a jewel thief and an art thief,
and a locksmith and an alarm technician. So this RV that you had, remember you were locked out of your own RV and you hired multiple locksmiths to get you in. What happened when I showed up?
Well, that was really fortunate somehow, and it's almost impossible to lock yourself out of a camper trailer like this. But somehow I managed to do it, and not only was the door latch locked, but also the bolt lock. So it's almost impossible to latch a bolt lock without turning a key in it. But somehow it happened, and all these locksmiths couldn't open it, and then. I didn't know what to do. I even ordered a key from the manufacturer and they sent me the key and that didn't work either. So I couldn't get into this van. It was really annoying. We were getting ready to go in a few weeks and Bill came to visit and knowing that he has an expertise in breaking into things, I asked him to give it a try and he was like, well, I don't know. It's been a long time. I don't know. I probably lost my touch and all this. And I borrowed a lockpick from a neighbor of mine, and within about 30 seconds, he had it open. So he's good at what he does.
It's, I guess, picking locks is like riding a bike, and something else that won't be mentioned that you just don't forget how to do because you've been to prison for 18 years. But
Yeah. Well, if I
I'll use
lock
those
myself
skills
out
for,
again, if you lock yourself out of anything, you know who to call.
yeah, I only use those skills for good now, you know. Listen, Gary, thank you so much for joining us again. Hello to Roxanne and Nora. We love you guys. We'll see you guys soon. And thank you so much. Gary is a friend. Please support him. Check out his books. Everybody have a good day.
All right. And you keep up the good work. You're doing some good work there, Bill. I'm real proud of you, how far you've come since you've gotten out of jail. And it's just great watching you succeed and grow and learn and continue to better yourself.
You definitely
You take care of your health.
I called you many times collecting all that from prison. So thank you for taking my calls and believing in me, man. It meant a lot to me to have a mentor like you in my life and a friend. So thank you again.
All right. Cheers, buddy.